Hello from Southern Ontario, Canada, December 27th, I think it is. Just a tractor vid, nothing political here today, so if you're not interested, you can certainly give it a miss. This video is mostly about tractor chains on the drive wheels, and a little bit about a 80 case backhoe you have up there in the bonneshere. Well, in the first place, when I parked little Annie in here a week or two back, I haven't been back since, forgot to turn my fuel tap off, and we can see the drooly result. Heavens knows the price of it today. The reason I have that inline tap is these glass, we can't call them filter bowl, sediment bowl, that's what they call it. I've yet to find an aftermarket one that actually turns off. I had this one. No, I didn't have it even off. Don't bother. They never turn truly off, and they don't work as a reserve either. However, that said, forgive my semi-breathlessness trying to get this door open by myself with a bit of a snow stuck to it. Yeah, the spring has long since expired, and it's like about all I can do to lift it. Anyways, tire chains. Now, they are more grief than you would imagine. Unless you really need them, I'd say stay away from them. Now, that said, a two-wheel drive tractor on ice or on frozen ground, even if your lugs are fresh, I mean, these are more than half worn, they'd be this high. On ice or frozen ground, it's quite astounding how easily you can get stuck in a two-wheel drive tractor. They work great in the snow, the mud, the dirt, but on frozen ground and again ice, there's nothing to displace. And again, it's quite astounding how readily you can get stuck in a two-wheel drive tractor, especially should you go off-roading, so to speak, in the bush. But in the bonneshere, you'd said you were considering adapting some old skidder chains to your backhoe. Oh, I'd say no. I know necessity is the mother of invention, poverty the father, and we all like a challenge, but if your chains don't fit like 95% perfect, they're going to squirm their way off there, especially when you really need them. The width where they come to is crucial. I mean, I know chains aren't cheap. To buy them new, I think the bare minimum, I'm probably looking at $1,000 just for this little end tractor, just for the two rear wheel chains. But to try and adapt one, I mean, I've tried it myself. I've seen other guys do it. You go to an auction, you buy tire chains from a farm auction for the price of the scrap metal, because nobody knows what size they are. You get them home and you think, oh, it looks close. What do you think, Louie? Yeah, well, we'll get out the hacksaw and the cutting torch. And yeah, I would suggest you go to one of those silly channels that I'm not such a fan of, like these guys who are homesteading. But they have $250,000 worth of equipment or more. For example, I saw one, the guy has a backhoe. He buys, 4 chains, front and rear, 4 chains from, Harbor Freight. He comes in at noon for lunch. The wife's going, you get those chains on? He's going, well, I got one on. They're surprisingly hard to wrestle on when they are the right size chain. It's almost a two-man job, to be truthful. Especially when you start getting into larger equipment than this little end tractor. To try and adapt your own, I think you're going to drive yourself nuts. And the odds of success of having something that's actually trustworthy, should you actually get stuck somewhere in the bush, I don't know. Anyways, let's move on. On John's tractor, this 165, there are openings in my center. Well, this is my hub center, and this is my hub. This end tractor doesn't. But were it to, or I could readily cut a hole in here, say one in between each from here to here. I could cut a hole and I could run a chain. One length of continuous chain, where's my finger, looped around the tire. Now, a lot of people are going to go, well, that's pretty hokum. Well, you know what? It's cheap and easy, and it works pretty well, actually. What you're going to end up with, depending on how many holes you have to work with in your hub center, or how many you want to cut, you might end up with your chain a foot apart across your tread here. So what you're going to have happen is kind of a slip grip when it hits the chain, slip grip when it hits the chain. I'll turn it around, it's kind of like, you know, the tractor's kind of going to go a little bit back and forth, but it will work for you. And it's economical, and it's almost bulletproof. You're not going to get into this Timothy Leary high on acid spider web out in the front where you're trying to keep your not, or I should say, ill-fitting adapted chains onto the tractor. If nothing else, again, go to something like, who am I thinking of? The Morgan's Homestead. That guy drives me nuts. Nice guy, nice videos, very informative. But I think the last one I watched was, can I make money selling firewood? Well, he has a $120,000 pickup truck, a $100,000 backhoe, a $60,000 Kubota tractor, about 4 quads, probably totaling $100,000. He's got about 10 chainsaws. Well, you're 50 years old, dude. You're never going to make enough money selling firewood to pay for that equipment. But videos like that, they can be good. The guy goes, here I am, year 2, with my $40,000 or $60,000 Kubota, and I've decided to buy some chains, and I'm going to put them on. Well, that's the right chain for the right tire, and you'll watch the guy still struggle. So enough about chains. You'd mentioned your, what is it, a Case 580 backhoe. I think when I said I had something lurking in the back of my head about that, let's look around while we're here. I'll set the phone down. I think Case might have bought out David Brown from England when David Brown went broke post Second World War. Now in Canada, David Brown has a reputation of being, stay away from them, because the parts are basically unobtainium. And I think Case bought out David Brown. Just as a Cliff Clavinism, David Brown goes back in tractors before Henry Ford or Harry Ferguson. But anyways, if I'm right that it's Case bought David Brown out, there were a few Case models that were actually David Brown models that were weak. So, my point is, 2 points really, that's kind of one of them. Before you invest a lot in, I assume you're bringing that 580 backhoe back into service, you might want to make sure, I don't know, I didn't Google it far enough, that it's not a transplanted, if you will, David Brown, and you'll have parts issues. Also, I don't know, is Case still Case, or have they amalgamated with someone else by now? I'm not certain. And another thing I noticed just Googling, like I only spent 10 minutes on this last night. I'm out of high-speed data on my phone for a few days. What I kept seeing coming up with those 580 cases is mentions of transmission issues. And I'd also see shuttle shift, which is a transmission feature. Now, 2 kind of points. You want to do your homework in bringing any tractor, putting it back into a working, they call it a working restoration. With your transmissions and your hydraulic lifts, your rear fluid differential, all that business, there's usually some kind of filtration system down in here. In John's 165, which is a 1965 to 1975 era of tractor, the filtration system for the hydraulics and everything back here is just a screen. I mean, it really just catches the big lumps and chunks. But that screen gets plugged up, messes up the way your hydraulics work, and also, nobody ever services these old tractors and backhoes and stuff. There's usually some adjustment necessary in this, I'll say, the rear end transmission hydraulic system of the tractor. You don't have to split the tractor. It's usually accessible. We'll grab the phone here. In under this type of side case thing here. So you want to do your homework on that first. And I mean, if your 580 has the shuttle shift, well, all the more reason you're going to want to do some homework and make sure that that isn't going to be an issue for it after you've, see previous videos, motor oil and filters and fan belts and carburetors and all that business. The shuttle shift, I remember in context of John's 165, when we were bringing it to life, I made some videos. And somebody very knowledgeable with that series of tractors, those Masseys from that era, was good enough to give me some advisement in the comments. And I remember saying in response to him, I said, well, it sounds to me like if I ever found a 165 gas, not diesel Massey, which I would like, to stay away from the shuttle shift. I don't need it. It's a farm field plowing type of, that's what it was designed for. And it was also a bit of a sales gimmick at the time in that era. I don't know who came out with the shuttle shift first, but everybody had to have one, you know what I mean? John Deere had one, so Case had to have one, so Ford had to have one, Massey had to have one. And of course, they're all their own kind of design variable because of patent laws. And, well, again, you've already got that machine, so if it has the shuttle shift, well, you're stuck with it, even though you don't need it. Not to say it is a problem, but again, stressing servicing that system, let's call it, before you put it in operation, because otherwise you may have invested this money somewhere else in the tractor, only to then run into, again, check that case isn't really a David Brown, and has Case amalgamated with someone else, and our part's going to be an issue. So, I think that's all I had to say in response to your questions up there in the bonneshere. To go back to chains again, I don't know. Let's remember a backhoe can get itself out of places that nothing else can. I mean, short of John wandering off into the swamp in the middle of the night, pretty hard to get a backhoe stuck. But if you have some degree of skill as an operator, you can't get it out. The front bucket has down pressure as well as tilt pressure. To some extent, it can pull itself forward. Better yet, it can push itself backwards. You can put the bucket down on its heel on the front, and then going to the back, you have the backhoe. I mean, you can turn the tractor around 180 degrees using that backhoe, or you can push or pull your way out. And so again, I mean, if you need chains, you need them. There's no two ways about it. But if you don't need them, I suggest you stay away from them. They're an expensive hassle at best. And again, I can't stress trying to adapt your own yourself. Well, if you need a challenge, and have a bunch of hacksaw blades, and better yet, some welding equipment, I would say. However, I know I'm beleaguering the chain issue thing, and I kind of forgot what my summation was with all of that. Yeah, I did. Something to do with the backhoe chain thing. But, oh, I know what I was going to say. A backhoe doesn't work very well in the bush. They're big, they're cumbersome, they kind of got that back end and front end weight bias. They're clumsy to turn with and stuff. You do have the bucket to carry stuff, yes, and you do have the ability to, especially with the rear backhoe, to maybe push or pull things and stuff. But you don't see many backhoes in the bush for good reason. So I don't know what your plan is with that 580 up in the bonneshere, but I hope I gave you some food for thought.